Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good.
And me? That's good. Okay. I'm not getting a spotlight. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, John, for the introduction. As John said, we're going to try and get through this as quickly as we can. There's quite a lot to say, so please hang on to the questions to the end. But I do realize after that is beer, so I'll keep it going.
We won't hold you back from the beer for too long.
No.
Or the wine.
Or the wine, or the orange juice. Hopefully you'll find something useful in the presentation today, and we'll go from there. So, introductions. This is William. That's William when he was 10. I'm William today. Yeah, as John said, William has written thriller books. Have a look on Amazon. You'll find him, William Knight. And also, he's done some journalism, some technology journalism, and has been in a number of reputed publications. He thinks he's a footballer, but he's not playing for Brazil like our model here. And he's currently working at Customs, still, as the acting development practice lead. So what do you do, Will?
So I'm a development practice lead, so it's coach, mentor, teaching people how to do better software delivery. It's all very interesting stuff, and we'll get into that in a minute. This is my friend Julien. Do you want to click me on? Thank you.
Yep.
So Julien has 4 children. I've known Julien for 20 years, almost as long as we've been in IT for both of us. But you've been in IT for 27 years, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Julien would be the first to admit that he is a complete nerd and a geek, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me saying that. And you can see here that he builds speakers and amplifiers in his spare time. The ultimate nerdery. Now, Julien, you were Applications Development Manager at Customs, weren't you?
Yeah, so I went in there 2 years ago as the acting Applications Manager, one of those normal, come in along, please, and help us for 4 months while we do a restructure, and I was there just over 18 months. I really enjoyed my time at Customs. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, as the acting Applications Manager, all of the different applications teams reported through to me, SmartGate being one of them.
So we're here to tell you a story about SmartGate Plus and how it spawned, and Julien did ask me not to say that word and I couldn't stop myself, how it spawned a continuous improvement framework, which we're going to get into. So first we're going to tell you why you should listen to us. So that's the first set of red circles up there on the left. Then we're going to give you a little case study about the SmartGate Plus project and why it was so successful and why it created this need for a continuous improvement framework. Then Julien's going to take you through the continuous improvement work that we've been doing at Customs over the last 18 months and where it's got to. And then at the end, we'll end with, that's the yellow bit there, the ochre bit. We'll end with some questions and a little bit about what that might mean to you and the learnings that we've got. Oh, no, that word I don't like either. The lessons that we've learned as well.
Cool. So, that's what we're doing.
But first, a little bit of a warm-up for you. I'd like everyone in the room who is in IT to stand up. Everyone who's in IT, that should be a few of you. Come on. Come on, who's in IT? Stand up, please.
Get some energy going in the room with the last presentation of the day. No start jumps, you're okay.
Remember, beer's coming.
Yeah, okay.
That's good. Right, now, I'd like you to sit down if you've been in IT for less than 5 years. Cool. That's good.
And then, you see where we're going here. Sit down if you've been in IT less than 10 years. I hear a chuckle here. You're worried, aren't you? So, less than 15 years, please sit down. Ooh, there's a lot of
20. Oh, that's got a few of you. So we got some 25. How many chocolate fish
you
have we got?
You can sit down now, Will.
So we got. So we're going to have 27. There you go. I knew I'd get Nigel in the end.
How many we got? How many we got?
There we go.
That looks just.
Look at that.
Oh, 28.
Let's get some. We've got enough chocolate fish.
29.
30.
30 years?
30
oh my
years.
God. Chocolate fish.
we might miss. Who's
Can
done
you catch?
30? 33? Yeah,
that's good. We've got 4 left.
There we go.
Thank you very much.
This is for taking part, being such good sports. Thank you. Here, catch chocolate fish. Big round of applause. Now, there's a reason you may not believe it for chocolate fish. You can sit down now. But I'd like you all now to stand up again if you think you're an expert in IT. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? We've got many experts here. We've got all experts. We've got one. We'd love to give you another chocolate fish. So why is that? Can you click me on, Julien? So why is it that we don't think we're experts, even though we've been in this industry for so long? Well, Malcolm Gladwell, I've forgotten his name, he said in his famous book, The Outliers, that it took 10,000 hours of consistent, dedicated practice to be an expert in something. So we've got 10,000 hours there. That says it's translated for you into 5 years, roughly 5 years to be an expert. But of course, IT is incredibly complicated, isn't it? And we don't feel like experts because nobody can possibly know everything there is to know about IT. And 10,000 hours simply isn't enough. So just to give you an illustration of that, I did a Wordle of my own CV here. Now, obviously, I've had a background in development, so that comes up a lot. But there's about 50 keywords on there. There's about 5 or 6 different programming languages, different management techniques, consulting, speaking, all that sort of stuff, not to mention the journalism stuff. Now, it would take me 5, 6, 10 lifetimes to be an expert in that. And that's what we're dealing with. That's what we are dealing with as an industry. So much complication and so difficult. It's growing all the time. It's getting worse and worse and worse. We've just got to keep swimming upstream to stay where we are. Hence the chocolate fish. I said we'd get back to it. But we need a way to keep swimming upstream. If we don't keep swimming upstream, we go backwards. We need a way to identify improvements all the time and keep those improvements rolling. We've got to implement them. We've got to make them stick. And we have to do this all the time. Julien.
There's a theme developing here with the chocolate fish, yeah? So swimming upstream. So I suppose looking at how you remain current and relevant, how we keep adding value to the business, it's important to balance these two areas, effectivity and efficiency. Effectiveness even. Thank you.
Efficientness.
Yes. So how do we balance these? He's helpful, isn't he? So effective and efficient, it's not like I've made it up. There's a whole bunch of other, I suppose, experts in the field that also look at these two areas. So an example, Mary and Tom Pappendijk. So they are leaders in the field of lean software development. I don't know whether you've ever seen Mary's visited New Zealand and done some speeches. So she talks about building the right thing. So building the wrong thing is the waste, and obviously eliminating waste is a big lean principle. But that's that effective approach again. And then building the thing right. So subtle twist on the right thing right. That's, again, about reducing waste, but doing it efficiently. So add value to the business, that's the effective, but doing it well is the efficiency. So balancing those two things as we improve to stay swimming upstream. If you're not swimming, as Will says, you're getting washed out. So Gojko Advic. Now, if you notice...
Debate about how you said that again today. Nigel, what is it?
Advic.
So, to the audience.
Yeah.
So, not even listening.
Gojko's visiting New Zealand. There's an Agile New Zealand conference later this year. He's one of the keynote speakers. Very good. He has this picture here where you want to be in that top right-hand corner. Now, he's twisted the axes compared to our picture, but the essence is the same, where you want to build it right and you want to build the right product. And if you do that, you get success. Obviously, if you're not spending enough time building the right product, but you're building it right, so you've got a fantastic method, but you're not joined up with the business failure. The bottom right-hand corner, we've all been here, where it's the right product, but time to market is slow, it's buggy, it's a maintenance nightmare. And then, I don't need to describe the bottom left-hand corner, but that's a technical term. So yeah, how do you remain effective and efficient while doing improvements? So we promised you, and the title that we lulled you into the room was to tell you all about SmartGate Plus, which we'll do now. And it's a very good example of building something that's effective, and building it efficiently.
So I'm going to take you through the story of SmartGate Plus. As a project took about 4 or 5 months to develop. But really, if this is a story about SmartGate Plus, it's also a story about a dedicated border patrol, border team. Customs itself is worth mentioning as the oldest government department in New Zealand. I didn't know that until 2 days ago when I was doing my research. It's responsible for stopping the dangers at the border, the hazard, stopping threats getting into New Zealand. They are really a dedicated bunch, and I've got to say I've not ever worked in a department that cared so much about what they did and how they did it. But simplistically, it actually boils down to 2 questions, really. The first question is, what container should I open up and search? Now, when I say container, I mean envelopes, packages, suitcases, anything that contains things is a container. It also includes actual containers. So which ones do I stop and search? And then the other question is, which people do I stop and get at, and do I apprehend at the border, or do I stop going out of the country, or do I stop? So obviously, these 2 questions have an awful lot of intelligence behind them, because we have to have the importers and exporters telling us what's going in and out of the country. We need to know the aircraft manifests. We need to know who's coming in, who's going out, what's in their suitcases, what underwear they wear, etc. So those are the 2 questions. But despite the dedication, and I think this is true of all IT departments, really, despite the dedication of the people who work in them, you know, it's not always the happiest place to work. So you've got a grumpy cat there.
Grumpy cat.
It's not always happy. And I think they'd be first to admit that not everything was well in the department. And certainly 2 years ago when we started there, they had defects in many of the products that was as long as your arms, and they were firefighting all the time. There were environments you had to book for testing, and of course they were unbookable. It was impossible to commission a new environment without a long wait. Because of this, the business often tried to circumvent IT and do its own thing off the back of its business problems that it needed solving. So it was not always happy, as I said, despite the very capable individuals. And worse than that, of course, there was no time for them to improve, because they were always fighting fires, and there was always the next greatest thing to work on. So Julien comes to me. Says, well, I've got an opportunity of a lifetime. Fixed costs, fixed scope, fixed budget. How do you fancy it? in joke there, some jokers. So,
project manager joke, isn't it?
So, of course, the thing we're talking about here was the SmartGate Plus project. So he wanted me to help deliver the project. We knew that we were doing the next generation of SmartGate. Now, if you don't know anything about the SmartGate, it's a biometric system. You go to a little booth here, somewhere at the front, you don't mind. So you go somewhere, you take a ticket, and it reads your passport, you take a ticket, and the photograph gets translated all the way through customs systems, and it comes out at the other end, and you go to the gate, where at the gate it matches the photograph it took off your passport with the photograph it sees of your face, and it allows you to go through, or allows you not to do. Or not. If you're a criminal like Julien, then of course you're not allowed through. That's a good thing. So that's the process for SmartGate as it stands at the moment. Now, SmartGate Plus puts all of that process into one process. So it reads your passport, and it does the biometric match at the same place, and it opens the gate. And this project was to do a proof of concept to implement the software at customs for that particular. And there it is at Auckland International Airport in the Kuru Lounge.
Yep.
Kuru Lounge, right? So there's a number of advantages, not just the single-step process, but there's no printer. Obviously, every day, imagine we've got to go and get this ticket. Somebody's got to go out and fill the printing machine with tickets, and that's an operational cost. And it gets jammed, it gets stuck, it runs out of ink. Okay, so that's just one little operational area that the SmartGate Plus gets away. Also, the real estate footprint at the airport of this project is much, much smaller. And that's a big cost saving. So you can see there's definite advantages for doing this. And it's improved biometrics. And we want to improve our biometrics all the time because we don't want people with funny noses and comedy goggles getting through, of course we do. And Julien said to me, he said, concentrate. I know we've only got a limited amount of time. I'm rambling on about people with funny So we've got to concentrate on not just building the product and building the proof of concept, but on a step change in the technical practices that the team are operating under. Now, Julien had already identified some changes that he wanted to put in place, and he'd already put in place when I joined. Firstly, we co-located the teams. So we had siloed teams of testers, architects, developers. We put them all together into one team and said, hey, you're the SmartGate team now, guys. Go for your life. That was to encourage collaboration. We put up visual workboards so we could see the work transparently that the team was working on. So any manager could come along and say, hey, look, I can see what you are working on today. Not yesterday, not next week, not in 3 months' time, but today. And Julien had introduced the beginnings of a testing rigor so that we knew we were focusing on quality. But what we wanted was confidence that the changes we were going to implement within the team were actually the right changes. Because it wasn't good enough that we just come in, some consultant, Julien, the acting department manager, just come in and say, hey, you guys, you're going to do this today and that tomorrow and this next week. We wanted the team to have confidence they were the right things. And we wanted to be able to sell this up to our managers that we knew what we were doing. So enter the dreaded maturity model. And here is an example of a maturity model here. So this was used to guide our choices. Now, this particular maturity model I've got up here is one, Nigel, there you are in the room. This is one that Nigel Charman here, we worked on about 4 years ago as a way of giving us exactly this confidence that we knew the kind of technical practices we wanted to improve in. And as I say, it's a way to create confidence and to communicate ideas and strategies. I can zoom in a bit further. Now, they're all the same, these maturity models, and this one was based on a CMMI maturity model going back a few years now. But the idea is quite simple. You have something like coding standards or code standards there, and then you look at what the team is doing. Do they have standards and style defined? And if they don't, they're less than a 1, they're a 0, right? Then if they're stage 2 improving, the standards are applied and enforced. Actually, people are actually following the standards, and so on, up to competent. I'll just nip back here. And you can see there's usually 5 stages in these maturity models. I think that's a sort of a law of maturity models, that they ought to have 5 stages, all the way from advanced to specialist. And there's some argument about whether you ever want to be a specialist, and maybe you don't, and maybe you do. So that's the maturity model. But what it does show you is that there is always a better way of doing something. You are never actually going to... Oh, gosh, here we go. How did that happen?
You're going forward, you're going to go backwards. You're going to go backwards.
Oh, well, no, I'm going backwards. That is backwards. Oh, we'll get there in a minute. So there's always a better way of doing a new way of doing something. There's always an improvement that you can make. So the analysis of our maturity model for the SmartGate team showed that there were 3 key improvements that we wanted to make here. So that's these three improvements there. We wanted to have an incremental and iterative life cycle. I'll go into a little bit of detail in a minute what these are in case you don't know. But it allows the teams to focus on small and valuable changes that the business actually wants. Then we had specification by example, is a process change that helps collaboration and helps the teams actually build the right thing all the time. And then a delivery pipeline, which is a continuous test and deploy mechanism. So here's about the incremental life cycle. You may or may not have seen this particular diagram before, but the business problem is a woman in a pastoral setting and has got somebody to do a painting, somebody famous apparently. So this is the idea of an incremental life cycle, is we build one small piece at a time until it's finished. And we go on to the next piece until it's finished, and the next piece until it's finished. Quite simple kind of idea, but at each stage, we just check with the business and make sure we're doing the right thing. So it's always checking back, adapting to what we know and relearning.
Because you might decide at number 2, that was enough.
Yeah, so Julien's quite right. It's to give the business flexibility to allow the business to say, hey, do you know what? I've got my woman in a pastoral setting. That's quite good enough. Thank you. I'm going to the exhibition now. And it stops them wasting time and doing 4, 5, and 6, in theory. I wonder what would have happened if Leonardo had been asked. So, that's it, Leonardo. You've had enough now. Sorry, mate. So this is from Gojko Adic's book, Specification by Example. And Julian's already mentioned he's coming to speak here in Wellington in November. I think so. It's in November? September. Thank you.
Oh, sooner than before.
He's going to go through this in a lot more detail, but specification by example is a mechanism to get the team collaborating with the business and directing the teams to build what the business needs all the time. It uses example behaviors and automates those example behaviors in tests. So it's automated testing as well as part of the process. Now, in order to get that living in a process so that it's relevant to the development team, we implemented a continuous delivery pipeline. I know these are all like big technical things, but this delivery pipeline is like a way of making sure the developers and testers are going through, because it will not let your code pass the stage gates until the tests are green. And this is the clever bit. That's why those arrows are in green. I don't need to say this isn't a real continuous delivery pipeline. This is just a mock-up. Laugh there. I thought that was funny. Must be a tech thing. I had a giggle over there. So the question is, you've gone remarkably silent as well, Julien. He's normally chatting away while I'm doing this. So was it easy? Was it easy? Well, no, frankly. And I look back and I think, actually, we took on an awful lot. We did. We took on a great deal. We had some challenges. The first thing is the managers stepped up to our visual workboard, took one look at the sticky notes, went, oh, this is project management in the agile era, is it? Threw the sticky notes on the floor, walked away disgustedly. Okay. So we smartened up our visual workboards and we printed out the cards properly and we made them look nice. Okay, that seemed to get rid of that particular objection. It was impossible to commission environments. So we wanted to build a delivery pipeline that went from a dev to a SIT to a UAT environment, etc. We couldn't commission them. So we ended up borrowing some PCs and creating a deployment pipeline under the desks of the developers. Right. We worked especially hard. We worked especially hard on business engagement as well. But our biggest challenge was the coaching, I think. And this is why I say I think we took on too much. Julian,
too much.
Yeah. Was that as soon as we stepped away from the problem, as soon as I stepped away from the team, it would immediately slide back. Remember that chocolate fish swimming upstream? We were there actively keeping that fish moving upstream. And as soon as we walked home, we went home for tea or we went out for a cup of coffee, that fish should be back in the shallows again. And that wasn't what we wanted. It wasn't a way we were going to improve the whole department, not without 1,000 consultants all there busy working away and doing the work that the teams should be doing. But we had successes too. We had a comprehensive automated test suite that was built as we went along. The testers and coders worked really well together, and they were doing the work of each other as well and collaborating on the work they did together. And they had a very good team ownership, smiling faces and collaboration. When I first joined, it was actually difficult to get people to say hello in the morning. So I said, hello, hello, good morning. And after 4 months of that, you can imagine I got a few answers back. And we got some smiling faces. And our biggest success was to get the project manager who was there at the time to understand that we were allowed to drop non-essential scope. It didn't matter. It mattered, but the non-essential scope was not a reason for failure of the proof of concept. We could trim the edges.
Yeah, so a lot of the SmartGate itself is very hardened. It's got lots of security testing in it, lots of backups and everything else, whereas SmartGate Plus as a proof of concept, we knew it was only going to be 3 months. Yeah. We didn't need all of those features. So hard to convince, I suppose, the business owner that this is just a proof of concept rather than a hardened production.
So even on the proof of concept, those features were in the original project plan. No one had sat down and said, actually, are these really a priority for a proof of concept where the biometrics is probably the most important thing to get right? So I've got a bit lost here, Julien. Sorry.
What's the next slide? Go forward one.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Happy Release Day.
So day of the release, how did we get on? Well, it was 3 months later. It was 5 developers, remember. I'm calling developers and testers. It was developers and testers together, devs. And there's 40 development stories. So if you know anything about Agile, that's like a story, a user story. We had 40 of those or so, delivered through a 3-stage pipeline. That's a development environment and an automated UAT environment. And then we released it. And we were very hopeful because we had spent so much time on quality. We had an automated test suite. We did not know of a single defect that was going into our live environment until the first morning. And we switch it on. Yes, it couldn't be all roses, could it? So we found one very minor problem, that a 17-year-old person was not allowed through the gate on that first day when they should have been. We went back to our specifications. We did a root cause analysis and realized there had been a misunderstanding of the specification. We rewrote the example behavior, re-automated the test, changed the code, deployed it back into the live production in 4 hours. So I know we had a defect, but that story is the sort of thing that we could do. That's delivery at pace, I think.
I've never seen one specific defect, especially such a trivial one, have so much conversation. But it's more from the point of view of success. Yeah. The project had been running for 6 weeks at the customs foyer with loads of customs officers bringing in their passports and testing it, and it was working really, really well. Of course, none of them were under 18. So that's how it slipped through. Yeah. But it worked very well.
Oh, that was a foolish thing to do.
Did you just turn it off?
Turn it off. This is why. So, we actually, we thought we'd found the treasure here. We dug gold because we'd been so successful. And it's true, we had great outcomes for the SmartGate Plus project, a defect-free, to all intents and purposes, project. It sat at Auckland Airport for 3 months. Some 10,000 passengers or so went through on process. After that initial defect, we found nothing else wrong with it. And it's now become the basis for the business plan to roll out in the future, which hopefully will be coming towards the end of this year or next. And on the face of it, we had dug up the pirate's treasure. However, there was a growing realization between us that the tech practices was not the end of it. We'd done our technical practices, we brought up the maturity, and we knew that a continuous improvement cycle of observe and fix could indeed improve the quality because we'd done so. But without a coach present, without me sat on the team or Julien cajoling us from the sidelines, it would quickly go back into its previous state. Without those 100 consultants, we had no hope of rolling this out across an entire department. Here's the cue. We needed a better way.
Cool. So what did we learn? Everyone needs to care. And, Will talked about the customs people. A lot of the developers, a lot of the testers had been there 20-plus years. And so there was care there, but it's care to do better. So getting the motivation key. Technical practices are not enough. They're a great start, and it's a good way to get technical people interested in process improvement. Start with the technical practices. But as Will said, we had to do a lot of coaching, a lot of checking that what we were trying to teach was actually being used. Especially under pressure, people revert to what they know. And business and IT communication needed continuous encouragement. Let's put it politely, encouragement. So, pretty picture. I suppose this is a picture of what we put together for our framework. So at the bottom there is the motivation.
This was an expansion of the maturity model that you saw earlier, the technical maturity model.
Yeah. So if you like, the GUI center there, the tools, the technical practices, and the methods, that's where we started. And we got a lot of acceptance and uptake. But we worked out there was things missing, which is what I just talked about. So motivation is the foundation. There's sort of 2 levels of motivation. A key one that you need to measure and understand, I suppose, is hygiene, basic level hygiene. I don't mean, you know what I don't mean. So there's a guy called Hertzberg who developed this model in the 50s and 60s, and he's, I suppose, the founder of a lot of the motivation theory that comes on today. He recognized that the basics needs to be, do I like working where I'm working? Do I like the desk, the computers? Do I like the team around me? Am I getting paid enough? Do I feel like I'm rewarded? Do I have enough holidays?
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning. Clean toilets.
Clean toilets.
Hygiene again, yeah. So you've got to get that right, yeah? And engaging with people and understanding whether that's a problem. Because if they're not right, it's actually really hard to motivate. But if you get them right, it doesn't mean that they're motivated. So that's the basis, yeah? The next level of motivation, I suppose, we've come to understand better these days. It's about empowerment, it's purpose, autonomy. So getting those things in place too. And so co-locating teams, cross-functional teams, getting people together to feel like, I'm not making a door, I'm making a car. Those levels of conversations. So motivation was the foundation for that. Guidance and governance. So that's about, I mean, a lot of organizations, government partners especially, but I've worked in other corporates as well, there's always a massive governance framework, but there's rarely a guidance framework. Yeah? So the guidance is about access to the tools that we need, access to the people that you need to teach you. So we had some full-time coaches like Will, but also we recruited in a lot of people that were top of their fields to help us. These are permanent people still at Customs. Help the team leads, help them deliver best practice. Business engagement. It always begins and ends with good business engagement. It's another pillar to support our pretty picture, even though I've turned it on its side there. So how did the framework work? So we talked about the different categories: motivation, governance and guidance, the tools and the practices, the business engagement. And we broke these down into a bunch of aspects and categories, and then analyzed and understood how the aspects measure against our old friend, effectiveness and efficiency, that I'm finding hard to say today. So here's an example. We're going to sort of dig into some stuff here which is like a Ministry X. This isn't real data. It wouldn't be fair to share the results of Customs and what we did. So Ministry X here, some made-up figures.
You'll recognize this as another maturity model or similar.
Yep. So the skills, practices, and experience, I suppose, is a lot of the basis that Willa talked about in the complex maturity model he showed before. But what you've got there is categories on the left, and then a bunch of aspects. Each aspect, then, you can't see it here, is weighted against efficiency and effectiveness, and out comes how the heck we rate. So we're in the bottom left, Ministry X there, so there's room for improvement. And what I've picked out here especially is access to SMEs. So Ministry X.
SME.
Yeah. Yeah.
You obviously know what SME means. What is that, Julien?
Subject matter expert.
Ah, I remember.
Oh, yes. Oh, I see. Yes, so, I mean, how often have we seen where the IT team gets access to their sponsor or business owner or even user, once a month, or maybe a whole bunch of business analysts that sit between them and the IT team? Whatever it looks like, in this particular case, Ministry X, there's a problem. So given that...
So we were going to translate into effectiveness and efficiency, remember?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Efficientness.
Yeah, efficientness. So you recognize those areas of weakness, and then you plan initiatives to improve them. So again, Customs, not unusually, had the same issue, which was the SMEs. So here's an example of an initiative report, and we were trying to work out how to get closer business engagement, better business engagement. And I know you can't read that. It's too small, and it's because it's, I suppose, a little bit sensitive, some of the information in there. But one of the ones in there says, foster a shared business understanding. Complicated terms. It's basically business engagement, business alignment. Let's get better at it.
Yeah. So the initiative that we've got here with the big red tick is comes from looking and analysing the whole of those maturity models across those 5 categories. So, and come up with an idea, which is foster a better business understanding. That's quite woolly, you'll appreciate. But what we have to then do is take that business initiative and turn it into tasks that we can actually deliver. So I know that for some of the cases like this one, initiatives like taking staff out to the airports. You may think that Customs does that all the time, but I can tell you that it doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily part of an induction program for new staff. So those are the sorts of things we were looking at. But an induction program for new staff doesn't just foster a better business understanding. It also talks about motivation. It talks about technical practice. It talks about things. So one of the initiatives we have set up is to have an induction program for new people. But that's come out of analysing the whole of these maturity models, not just looking at one of these individual initiatives. So there's always an analysis that goes on with this material.
Yeah, as Will said, the visit to the airport was quite amazing. I mean, some of these guys had been there 20 or 30 years, had never been to the airport and seen the customs view. I mean, they're customers, yeah, they wander through customs, they probably all travelled internationally. But to actually go in there and see what the customs officers do on a day-to-day basis and how they use their systems and how SmartGate works or doesn't was an eye-opener. And then we do the initiative. So just sort of winding back a little bit, we measure, and there's a maturity model that covers a whole bunch of different aspects. The technical practices obviously is the basis, but I think it's quite a...
glue, you said.
What's that?
The glue.
The glue, yeah. Oh, no, well, the GUI center, if you like, is the technical practices in the middle, the tools, the development environments, the platforms that you're using. And that's obviously going to vary by organization. But the foundation is motivation, yeah? Getting guidance and governance as a pillar, and then getting the business engagement right. So we measure, we plan, and we do. So measure, and it's a cycle. Repeat, 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 looking for initiatives. So I'll get you all dizzy now. Measure, plan, do.
So how long does that take, Julien? Measure, plan, do, cycle?
Well, it varies on the initiative. So, for example, the one before where we get a better business engagement, foster understanding of how the business works, that's something that we measured, identified, and ran an initiative. The initiative ran for 6 to 9 months, yeah, and then you measure again. But if you're working on, let's say, a detailed technical practice, you might be able to roll that out a whole lot quicker, and you might measure again in 3 months, yeah? So, yeah, I think from our point of view, that having a framework that shows and understands where we sit against other organizations and compare ourselves against some best practice in the industry, having a framework to sort of demonstrate that and understand it, and then show that we can improve, show that there's a plan, got a lot of traction into the management, into the senior managers at IT and into the business, a plan to improve rather than what are we going to work on today, you know, finger in the air. So what happened?
So we had our five pillars of improvement, if you like, here: the governance and guidance, environment and support. That's technical environments and support of those technical processes. Business engagement, technical practices we talked about, you know, the unit testing and the deployment pipelines and things, and then motivation, that foundational factor. So you can see here what our aim was. This is not real data again, as Julien said, but we wanted to take from a base level and expand it. So the bigger that area, the better it is.
So blue is where we were, and orange is the target.
So we actually had some 50 key initiatives that we wanted to work on, and we, you know, as before, we couldn't do this ourselves. So we employed a group of new team leads, Julien's already mentioned, and practice leads to help roll this out across the. Thank you. That's good, isn't it? To roll this out across the floor. And we embarked on a second wave of round of measures and then key initiatives and implementation. So with our new members of the team there. Now, we prioritized our key initiatives. I said we had about 50 of them. We couldn't work on them all. We prioritized them, and we came up with about half a dozen, 5 things that we wanted to do. And primary among that was motivation, was one of the things we needed to work on. And we set to work, and over a year now, since this started, I believe we have embedded a culture of continuous improvement at Customs. They're only on there, and we talked about the cycle time for this. You do measures, you plan, and you implement. That could be a year's cycle, and for many of the things, that's what it's taken. Take a whole year to improve on things. There's still business as usual to get on with, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. But slowly and surely, I now believe, embedding a process of continuous improvement that actually gets used and gets results in a team might be good enough all and of itself. But we've also changed the focus on delivering value at Customs as well, and the teams are co-located and they are focused on delivering their work by themselves, which I think is a really positive thing. So overall, we have begun the journey of improving and swimming upstream against the ever-increasing tide of complexity in IT.
Cool. So some summary.
So one of the things we want to take away here is we don't want to over-egg this pudding. This
Yeah.
isn't a silver bullet. This isn't like a magic pixie dust, I think was mentioned earlier, that's going to suddenly make everything working better. It takes work. It takes effort. It's like walking along a ridge line. If you take a step, you could easily tumble down to the bottom again and go the wrong way. We have had success, and we've been very pleased with it, not least with the SmartGate Plus project, and a couple of projects that came afterwards had very good quality as well. But every organisation is different. Every organisation faces its own peculiar problems, its own peculiar culture. And it's hard to recognise the importance, though, of recognising the issues that you have and trying to improve them. Some people are scared to raise issues. Some people raise issues and then nothing happens to those issues. It's not worth it. They keep quiet. Nothing gets done anyway. These are things I'm sure you've all heard. And it's difficult to identify problems when you're in the thick of running your operation in any case, because your eye is somewhere else. Your eye is on...
We're really close.
But using a methodical method to identify and fix impediments can be an aid to reducing that complexity, increasing happiness, improving motivation, and encourage speaking out. And most importantly, keep you swimming upstream.
Cool.
So I've got a few thank yous. Nigel, you're in the room. Thank you.
Wait first, Nigel.
400 times. And Olga and Ed, who aren't here, I'm afraid, today, for helping us roll out some of our technical improvements. And Assurity for their support and help during the year and a half I've been at Customs.
There's a whole bunch of names up there. I'm not going to go through them all. From Customs, they're the leadership team in IT on the application side. As I said, they are using the framework. Will's still there. I've moved on to different colour pastures. I won't say greener. And so into questions. So we're going to prompt the questions, okay, to get you in the mood. But it seems like questions aren't a problem. But Will, if you
write down the questions now, and then
yeah. What was your big learning?
So look, I look back over this 18 months, and I'm still astounded. And we've mentioned it here in this presentation about how difficult IT is. It was quite an eye-opener for me to do the Wordle on my own CV, actually, because I suddenly realised how little I knew about how much, and I think that faces a lot of us in this business. When I started out, it was a single PC and the Pascal programming language, I think, a rollout was a floppy disk, etc. You know the picture, and now it's just become this uber great industry that you cannot hope. And I can't count how many times I see IT people talking together, but they're not really talking. They're not really communicating. They don't understand each other. And that's a real indictment of our industry that we really need to strive to fix. We need to keep going at that, because without that we cannot serve our department and we cannot serve the business. And you, Julien, what's your biggest lesson here?
So I suppose I've worked in a whole bunch of organisations, 20 years in New Zealand, most of it has been in government. And I suppose one of the things that we learned, and the light suddenly went on, is it's fine. We spend an awful lot of time working on trying to be more efficient in IT. Yeah. Whatever practice we're rolling out, what method it is today, what sort of documents, and all of that effort, and we forget about the effectiveness. Yeah. What difference are we actually making into the business? And if we're not measuring that, and we're spending an awful long time just trying to get better at what we do, we're missing the point. So, what questions do you have?
Yeah, just time for a few questions. I think it's a mark of the quality of the presentation that no one's left. It's really good.
I saw some.
There are drinks to come.
I'm sure about that.
Yeah. Anyone got a question? A quick question. I'll step in then. I'm really interested that you said at the start that one of the problems was obviously embedding things so that the chocolate fish didn't swim backwards.
Yeah.
And yet you seem really confident now.
So the team that's left over, the leadership team that's left over under Ray Cook, there's the new applications manager. They are very keen on keeping the continuous improvement process going. Just by coincidence, it's also lined up with a continuous improvement program that comes from the top of customs and down. So we've got a sort of a bottom-up, like grassroots continuous improvement program. Well, that's going to marry up with one that's come down from the top as well. So I'm very hopeful that that will happen. And the plan is to put dedicated time aside for each development team in each release period to do nothing but innovation work and self-improvement work.
I'll go with one more. So, in just putting you on the spot, roughly what sort of percentage of effort or cost goes into that mentoring and support process in the project?
So I'll have a go at that one. Well, I mean, that was Will's full-time job and still is, yeah? So there's one person there. But there's a bunch of people that own those practices that actually, and there's 4, and none of them have any line management responsibility, yeah? Their job is, all the time, help the team leads deliver better software using this as a framework to identify where they should work on at the moment. So an IT team of 50 plus working on most of the applications at customs. There's a whole bunch of other stuff going on JVMS, if you've heard of that. It's none of that. This is the legacy systems and the applications and the SmartGates. So 50 plus people, so a tenth of that is focused on, are we being efficient and effective?
Thanks. I just invite you to, we have one question.
Thank you. No chocolate fish.
No more fish.
I just have one question, and that is, did any of the changes you made move into the business?
Really good question. So the question was, did any of the changes we made move into the business? What was really interesting is most of the business engagement at New Zealand Customs from IT happens through a group in the business called Operations Development. Sorry, I've got it the other way around. And when we began to show them the framework and how it was working, they said, well, that's all really nice. Can we apply it against ourselves? And so I don't think we've quite got to that.
No,
but pretty much the framework of the foundation of motivation with guidance and governance, with the business engagement, they were really keen to develop a set of measures for themselves, measure themselves, and then show that to their management. Yeah, I mean, it's quite a generic approach. We don't imagine it's rocket science. Yeah, if that answers your question.
Okay, well, again, thanks to you both for a really interesting talk, and also can I just say thank you to Information Leadership who sponsored this session this afternoon, and I'm sure you'll join with me in thanking them. Thank you.